So you know you want to get a Bambu Labs 3D printer, but which one is best for you? With so many specs, options, and YouTube videos to sift through, it's a little easy to get decision fatigue. That's why in this video, I'll share my honest opinion and take on all 4 Bambu Lab printers that I personally own. And that's the A1 Mini, the A1, P1S, and X1 Carbon. Hey everybody, Chris here from It's Mead Made, and I've been printing with these 4 printers for a while now. So I've got some great insights for you, and just a heads up, this video is going to be a little long. But hang in there with me because I am going to compare the printers beyond just taking the specs at face value. I'm going to show you exactly how each printer performs and tell you about some of the interesting and unexpected things that I found out that I haven't seen anyone else talk about. I'm going to show you the variety of real prints and share the pros and cons of each printer, and give my personal recommendation as who each printer would be good for. So go ahead, grab yourself a cup of coffee or even a snack, and let's go ahead and get into it. Real quick, a disclaimer. Bambu was awesome enough to send me these printers for me to use and share with you. However, I am not paid to say any of these certain things. These are all my own opinions, good or bad. Also, a huge shout out and thank you to all of my viewers that use my affiliate links. You are the reason that I am able to keep creating free and valuable content and keep this channel going. So, thank you. In this first section, I'm going to talk about the basic specs and features. This will be great if you're a beginner and really don't know what you're looking for yet. But if you've already been watching a ton of videos, then you've likely heard a lot of the things I'm going to say. But I will say, stay tuned for the next section, because I'm going to be talking about my personal experiences with these machines, and the things that you need to know that could really impact your decisions on which machine you want to get. Before diving into the specifications of the Bambu Labs A1 Mini, it's helpful to first understand the 2 primary motion systems used in these 3D printers. It's Core XY and Bed Slinger. Now, a bed slinger means the print bed moves back and forth along the Y-axis, while the print head moves along the X-axis. Many of the most affordable entry-level 3D printers are bed slingers. Bed slingers can have challenges with higher speeds of printing, such as increased vibrations and potential quality issues, especially with those taller, skinnier objects, which is why many have moved to the Core XY printers. Now, the Core XY system has a fixed print bed, with the print head moving along both X and Y directions throughout a complex belt arrangement. Core XY printers are great because of their ability to produce high-quality prints at really fast speeds, though they can be a little more expensive than the traditional bed slingers. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's get into the key features and capabilities of each printer to help you determine which one might be right for you. First, we have this little guy, the Bambu Lab A1 Mini. So the build volume is 180 by 180 by 180 millimeters. It's really ideal for those small to medium-sized projects like miniatures, decorative items, and functional parts. The heated build plate reaches up to 80 degrees Celsius or 176 degrees Fahrenheit. A heated bed aids in print adhesion, and it also reduces warping, which is super important. Now, the motion system that this uses is a bed slinger design. And when we're talking about speed, it can go up to 500 millimeters a second, with an acceleration speed of 10,000 millimeters a second. That is a really good thing to help balance speed and quality. Now, when it comes to filaments, right here you can see all of the filaments that it is capable of printing, making it pretty versatile for various projects, especially for beginners. It's also equipped with a low frame rate live viewing camera, and that camera's resolution is 1280 by 720 pixels. The A1 Mini's compact design is suitable for limited spaces, and that being said, if you don't have an AMS Lite, but we're going to talk about that later. One nice thing about this is it's pretty much ready to go out of the box with minimal setup. It includes features like an automatic bed leveling system, filament runout detection to enhance your printing experience, which is a very nice feature to have, and it just pauses and lets you reinsert another spool. It also has a really nice touchscreen with a user-friendly interface. Now, I will say the screen is a little tiny and you have to be careful when you're making your selections because sometimes you can hit the wrong button. But the A1 Mini is very user-friendly. It's a compact 3D printer that's perfect for beginners and hobbyists. If you're looking to tackle small to medium projects with just standard materials, the A1 Mini is a really good choice. So let's talk about the A1 Mini's big brother, the A1. The A1 comes with a build volume of 256 by 256 by 256 millimeters. It's suitable for larger projects like functional parts and detailed models. The heated bed that it comes with can reach up to 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The motion system is a bed Slinger design, and the print speeds can go up to 500 millimeters a second, with an acceleration of 10,000 millimeters a second. Which, if you haven't noticed, is the same as the A1 Mini. It's a really good balance of speed and quality when it comes to a bed slinger. And when it comes to the filaments that it supports, you can see the list right here. But we're going to get into more about filaments in a later section. Now, when it comes to the features, it has a low frame rate live viewing camera for monitoring your print progress. And the resolution of that camera is 1280 by 720 pixels. The A1 is equipped with a full-color touchscreen display for easy navigation. And personally, I think the A1 has the best interface out of the entire line, because the screen is bigger than the A1 Mini and it's just super user-friendly. It is compatible with the AMS Lite system for multicolor printing as well, which allows you to print up to 4-color 3D prints. The Bambu Lab A1 offers a generous build volume and user-friendly features, making it a solid choice for both beginners and experienced users. Its compatibility with the AMS Lite system adds versatility for multicolor and multi-material print projects. However, I will say that the bed slinger design may introduce challenges at higher print speeds. So I personally think it's better suited for those moderate speed printing projects. So now let's switch gears and talk about the step up from the A1. And that is the P1S. The build volume is technically 256 by 256 by 256 millimeters, but I'm going to get into that later. The heated bed reaches a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The motion bed system is a core XY design, allowing for higher precision and faster movements. The print speeds can go up to 500 millimeters a second, and the acceleration can go up to 20,000 millimeters a second, offering quicker print times. If you've noticed, that's actually double the acceleration of the A1 and A1 Mini, which can really cut down on some print times, especially I have found when you're dealing with multicolor prints. The P1S supports a wide range of materials, including the engineering-grade filaments due to its enclosed design and heated bed. But I'm going to get more into the specifics of this printer later, because this little guy has a lot more to unpack that I think you want to know about. But this printer also comes with an integrated camera for live monitoring and printing. The camera resolution is 1280 by 720 pixels. The P1S includes a fully enclosed body that helps maintain consistent temperatures, which is super nice with some of those specialty filaments. It's also compatible with the AMS for multi-material and multicolor printing. A downside is that it doesn't have a touchscreen interface. You get that 90s style car stereo interface that is a little clunky to navigate. But the Bambu Lab P1S stands out with the core XY motion system, offering enhanced precision and speed. Its enclosed design is beneficial when you're printing those temperature-sensitive materials, making it a versatile option for users looking to experiment with a lot of different types of filaments. So now let's talk about the Bambu Lab flagship printer, the X1 Carbon. Now, the build volume is technically 256 by 256 by 256, like the P1S. And like I said, we'll get into that in a later section. The heated bed gets up to 110 degrees Celsius or 230 degrees Fahrenheit on a 220 volt system, and up to 120 degrees Celsius or 248 degrees Fahrenheit on a 110 voltage system. The motion system is a Core XY design, and once again, that's going to allow you to print faster and have more precision on printing. The X1 Carbon can achieve speeds of 500 millimeters a second with an acceleration of 20,000 millimeters a second, which is the same as the P1S. This printer handles a wide range of materials, including high-performance filaments, all the way down to this simple PLA. So now talking about some more of the advanced features, it's equipped with a high-resolution camera for detailed live monitoring and recording. The camera resolution is 1920 by 1080. And the X1 Carbon comes with advanced capabilities like a built-in LiDAR scanner, which scans your first layer to catch any fails or spaghetti. And it supports a multi-material printing with the AMS. The Bambu Lab X1 Carbon is a top-tier printer. It offers advanced features that cater both enthusiasts and professionals. Its higher heated bed temperatures and Core XY system make it suitable for complex and high-quality 3D prints. The inclusion of features like the LiDAR scanner adds just an extra step to ensure precision and reliability, which justifies its position as the premium option on the Bambu Lab lineup. Now, I will say each of these printers offer unique features tailored to different printing needs. So consider what aspects are more important for your projects when making your choice. So now that we've covered all of the unique features, let's talk about managing and monitoring of printers. This section applies to all of the Bambu printers, so I thought I'd talk about it next. When managing and monitoring your Bambu Lab 3D printer, you have several streamlined processes that you can use. And the first way is the more traditional way, and for those of us that have been printing a while, you should know this. This is where you slice your model using Bambu Studio or another capable slicer like Orca Slicer on your computer. You save those sliced files onto a micro SD card, then insert it into the slot on your printer, initiating the printing directly from the printer's interface. The second way is using a wireless printing option via Bambu Studio. If your printer is connected to your Wi-Fi network and you've paired it with your Bambu account, you can slice models in Bambu Studio and send them wirelessly to your printer. This method eliminates the need for any physical media like your micro SD cards, and allows more seamless file transfers. And to be honest, this is really the only way I print my files because it's just so easy. The last option you have is Bambu Lab has a mobile app. And yes, there's an app for that. Their app is called Bambu Handy, and it enables you to start, stop, pause, and just monitor your prints remotely. It allows you to keep an eye on your prints in real time, and you can receive notifications upon completion. And for models like the X1 Carbon, you get alerts if any print failures are detected. I honestly find myself viewing my printers just about anywhere when I'm leaving the house, and the app is super handy. And I will say this app is especially important to have if you go with a P1S, because I find myself using this to control my printer rather than using the interface on the printer. These options provide flexibility in managing your printing workflow, and that's whether you prefer a more traditional method or the more modern wireless solutions. So now that we've talked about that, let's just jump in and talk a little bit about the slicer software. Bambu Studio is obviously the slicer Bambu created to use with their printers. And personally, I think it's great. I have a lot of video tutorials on how to use Bambu Studio on my channel, and I'll go ahead and throw a playlist up here for you. And however, I will say you can use Orca Slicer with Bambu printers as well. And to be pretty honest, both of them are pretty similar. And I've been using Orca Slicer successfully now for a little while, and I like it too, but I like Bambu Studio a lot more. So I wanted to show you the exact quality of each one of these printers. And I went ahead and took the same model with brand new spools of filament for each one of them that are all the same to really be able to have some comparisons. I went ahead and I sliced these files at the highest quality settings there is. And I also added tree supports, but did nothing else. And I wanted to just see what would happen. I had a pretty good idea what was going to happen when I just have the exact same settings across the board, but I wanted to show you. If you notice, I have more than 4 models here, because I had 2 fails when it came to my sliced files. And that is when I was printing on the bed slingers, the A1 and A1 Mini. It was moving back and forth so much at those speeds, it went ahead and broke off some of these supports. Now, there are things that I did to be able to make these print flawlessly, but it's not just out of the box. When you're dealing with the Core XY, you can get away with a lot more because that bed is not moving back and forth so much, because it's only going up and down. It's the tool head that's moving around. But here, the print is physically moving around, and you gotta be careful because when you have some really skinny supports, they can easily just break. And when the tool head hits that, well, your print is pretty much going to turn into something like this. So you might be wondering what I did differently on the bed slingers versus Core XY machines. First thing is I upgraded the build plate. I'm using a Super Tack build plate from Bambu. And this build plate is amazing because it has a really good stick, and those filaments, I mean, they stay on. This has been cooled down and everything. Versus the textured build plate, this one is already just popped off naturally when I took it off the build plate. So you need to have some extra adhesion, and upgrading your build plate can help immensely. Now, these are not that expensive to get, and you can get them for both the A1 Mini and A1. And the other thing is I increased the support thickness. So the supports are a little bit more beefy than the ones on here because I wanted them to have a little more girth because of that motion back and forth. And that's all I really did because the supports are the exact same, all of the areas. I just increased the thickness of my support branches. And even then, on the A1, I still had a failed print because I had a very small one, but I specifically did not change it because I wanted to see what it was going to do, and I wanted to show you an honest print. Because sometimes these prints, the supports will fail, and that is not just on the A1 and A1 Mini, it's also going to happen to you on the X1 Carbon and P1S. It just takes experience to understand when you're looking at these supports what I need to do to be able to, increase it a little bit here and there to make it print beautifully. And luckily, the little branch right here was just supporting under the chin, and it has a little bit of a mark, and I'll show you, but it's not that big of a deal, and this is still a beautiful print for me to be able to paint if I want to. So before we take these off the build plates and remove the supports to see the real quality of these, I think it's important to understand how long each one of these took. So with the X1 Carbon, it took 36 hours and 15 minutes. Then the P1S took 36 hours and 10 minutes, which was 5 minutes faster, but I honestly think it was because of the extra calibrations that the X1 Carbon does. Then we have the A1. It took 38 hours and 40 minutes to produce this model. And lastly, we have the A1 Mini, which was 16 hours and 37 minutes. So, now that we know how much time these all take, I'm going to go ahead and remove these from the build plates and take off the supports so we can get a closer look. So first up, let's look at the X1 Carbon. And the X1 Carbon, if we really zoom in here, we can see that the quality on this turned out beautiful. I mean, the surface looks really nice. And let's look at, more importantly, the supports. Now, if we look at the supports where they were at, this is a little bit rough, and we can kind of scratch some of that off. And with a little bit of sanding, this could look great. And underneath here, there's just a little bit right here of rough spots. But when we're really looking at the smoothness of this print, you cannot see any layer lines. I mean, this is going to look great. All I'm going to have to do to paint this is put a little bit of primer on it, and there we go. Now, we do have a little bit of stringing, those little wisps right here, and it's very, very minimal. Like, I mean, just rubbing it off, it just removed that. So I think we're pretty good with that. But really looking at this overall, the complexity of this because of this tongue, that was not a really easy print. And also the teeth. Like, let's look at the teeth here. You can see that these were overhangs, and it supported it pretty well. There is a little bit of roughness behind the teeth right here, right where the overhang was happening. But this is something that can easily be sanded away and make it look really, really good. Especially if we're going to be painting this. Which I'm probably going to, because this is so amazing. And also, if we look, like, the back is nice and clean. I mean, that's just a beautiful back right there. And all of the different surfaces is just so nice and smooth. So, when we're looking at the quality, at the X1 Carbon, the highest model of Bambu printer we can get, I am not surprised by the quality that we have. Because, I mean, it's just a beautiful printer, and this is an absolute beautiful print. So now let's go ahead and move on to the P1S. So looking at this initially, we definitely have a lot more wisps, and I don't know if you can see that. We can have a lot more of this just like fuzzy stringing on here, and this could be the filament or it could have been the settings, but either way, me just rubbing it, I mean, they're going away easily. So this is the kind of stuff when you're dealing with little fine wisps of hair when it's going from like the supports over to the model. It's something that you can get. And with a heat gun, that can also take care of it. And when we're looking at it though, I mean, this is a very small amount. You can kind of see on some of the edges, there's just a little bit of wisps. They're so fine, I don't know if they're even showing up on camera. But this is looking really nice as well. If we look at the quality of the skin, we can see that we have a little bit of banding on this one. It looks like, and I mean, it's very minuscule. I don't know if you can even see it. There we go. You can kind of see some of that little banding right there. Now, let's go to the other one, the X1, and see if we see any of that banding. And I don't see any banding on this one. So that is just a little bit of a print defect, that little banding. And that is something that happens when you're dealing with bigger models. Even when we're looking at the smooth side here, we don't see any banding whatsoever. And if we look at where the supports were, it is just as rough as the X1, where those were actually supporting this and creating this tongue. And it looks really nice. Like, all I'm going to have to do is minimal sanding here, and it will look really good for painting. And if we look at the teeth where the overhangs are, because they're coming out, because this is how it printed. So this is a really far overhang, and this is honestly why I chose this model, because of the overhangs, and it's got this big piece that's printing all by itself before it attaches. So looking at those, you can see just a little bit of roughness underneath the teeth, but it still did a really decent job. Because if you think about it, this model, you're going to see it like this. You're not really going to be seeing it up underneath it like this. But no matter what, it does look really nice with minimal sanding. So there's not a lot of work that would need to be done before I throw primer on this to be able to paint it. And remember that this is at the absolute highest quality, and that is why we don't see any layer lines. And the filament I used, which was the Polyterra PLA from Polymaker, it does an amazing job to, like, just, it melts together beautifully and lays down really good layers. So, looking at this, we can see that the quality is just as good, I would say, as the X1 Carbon. So, let's go ahead, set this guy aside. So now we're ready to look at the A1, and here we go. This is the beautiful quality that we got. Now, I'm just going to show you why this failed, is because of this support right here that came underneath the tongue. It broke off, and that is why this print failed, because everything else, I mean, if you look at it, it looks just beautiful. I mean, everything else turned out really nice. But that is why I went ahead and increased those supports to be able to get them to add on a little better and to make this print be successful. So let's go ahead and look at the A1 successful print with those beefed up supports. So when we're really looking at this, we can go underneath here and let's look at the support marker first. Now, this one is a little bit rougher. It looks like there's still some support material left on here that I could probably peel off. There we go. And underneath here is a little more rough as well. So as a quick comparison right here, you can see that here is the bottom supports for the P1S, and here they are on the A1. You can see that they are just a little bit rougher, but they still are just with a minimal amount of sanding. I could get this to be really smooth. So, you know, it's not that big of a deal, but looking at this, I would say that the A1 did not do as good as the P1S and X1 Carbon. But I'm being super picky right now because this is not terrible when it comes to supports. Now, when we're looking around here, there is a tiny bit of stringing. You just see these little angel hairs and wisps on the teeth, but nowhere around the eyes like we did see. And if we're looking here, we can see almost, it looks like that same banding across. It looks like maybe a layer just got messed up and then it recorrected itself pretty quickly. But we can see that. If we're looking on the side here, I mean, it's perfectly smooth. We don't see any layer lines or any banding whatsoever. This one turned out really nice. So we got a little bit of angel hair and wisps on the bottom here in the edge. Now, when we're looking at the teeth, because remember, this is how it printed, so these overhangs kept coming out. Now, you can see that these teeth are a lot rougher, and there's not as much volume as the P1S and X1 Carbon. But it's still, I would say, it did a really good job. For a bed slinger, the quality of this, I mean, it is absolutely phenomenal. But when we're comparing the P1S, you can see that the volume is there and the overhangs are not as bad. But when we switch over to the A1, you can see how it did not handle the teeth as well. And that's because it's a bed slinger. Bed slingers just don't support overhangs as well as Core XY machines. But if we're looking at this overall, I mean, this is still, like, with the amount of detail in this mouth and the tongue, I mean, it turned out really, really nice. So now let's move on to the A1 Mini. And here we go. Here's the A1 Mini. So you can see that some of these little tiny supports almost failed and then recorrected themselves. And let's just pop this off to show you how easy these supports come off. Like, I mean, they come off beautifully. And even down here, it just pops off, and there we go. But I just wanted you to see this failure too, because I think it's important to see like the differences when you're dealing with a bed slinger design versus the Core XYs. And everything else, I mean, if you really look at this model, everything else looks absolutely beautiful. But obviously the tongue didn't work out. But I think it's more important to see the final result that did work out. So when we look at this, like, I didn't do anything to it yet besides remove supports, and you can see a lot of these little wisps, and they're all over it. There's probably got more wisps on it than any of the other prints, but this is also a smaller print. And if we're looking at just the supports alone underneath, I would say that the supports, like where they are honestly just as clean as the P1S and X1 Carbon. And also, you just have to keep in mind that this is a smaller surface area than when we were supporting on the A1. And that is the big difference here, is we're printing smaller, so it's able to support those areas just a little bit easier. Now, if we look at the quality here, I don't see any banding whatsoever. And we're like just looking at the sides, like you don't see any layer lines. It's just a beautiful print, and you can really see all of that beautifully. Now, if we're looking at the teeth again, of how the overhangs work, now I would say that this does a little bit better than the A1, only because it's smaller and there's less area to go over to, but it still did not get all of it, because you can see how they kind of get flatter at the tips, instead of like those round cones of the teeth, how they're supposed to be. And when we look at the rest of the quality of the surface, I mean, it really looks nice. All of those details came out beautifully. You can see how, like, you see all of those veins. I mean, this is just a really nice print, too. And it's a little more manageable versus this big guy, but you can see the differences here of how much bigger that you can print on the P1S versus the A1 Mini. But when we're talking about small figures and stuff like that, like, this is a nice size. So when we're really comparing all of the models and you're looking just at the quality, I would say these two are identical when it comes to the quality of the prints that it can make. Now, the A1, the quality, I would say it is probably 95% of the quality of these two, just because of those teeth. And this is those overhangs, I mean, that is pushing that printer to the max. But at the end of the day, if I'm being honest, I think the P1S and X1 Carbon have a better print quality than the A1. Now, I'm not saying to go just with the Core XY machine because of the quality and the overhangs. I'm just saying that it's things to look at and consider. Because in all reality, we're comparing these printers, and the margin of comparison is pretty small. Like, if I put this up on a shelf and I put this one up on a shelf, I mean, you're not going to be able to tell the quality difference in any way. It's really when I'm getting in there and I'm really looking at it and inspecting it. If you're really going to be painting these and you need to do some cleanup, you're going to have to do just a tiny bit more cleanup on the A1 versus the P1S. And am I saying that that is the case for everything? Absolutely not. There are some models, if they were support free, I guarantee we would be looking at the exact same printed model because they're all going to turn out the exact same. Especially if they were all small and fit on the A1 Mini build plate. Because these printers look good. I mean, they print really well. And we were pushing this as much as we could on these specific printers so you could see those small differences when you're 3D printing on each one of them. Alright, so now let's talk about multicolor printing. Because this is one of the biggest draws of the Bambu printer. The Bambu Lab Automatic Material System, or AMS, and AMS Lite are accessories designed to enhance 3D printing by enabling multicolor and multi-material capabilities. First, let's talk about the standard AMS. Its design allows you to hold 4 spools of filament that utilizes motorized rollers to manage filament feeding and retraction. The AMS works with Bambu Lab's enclosed printers, like the X1 Carbon and P1S. Like I said, it supports up to 4 colors or materials per unit. By daisy chaining up to 4 AMS units using an AMS hub, you could achieve up to 16 different colors or materials in a single print. In my setup, I have 2 AMS units connected to my X1 Carbon and just have my P1S using a single spool of filament. Those are pretty much all of the pros of the AMS. When it comes to the potential cons, so you may experience capability issues when it comes to non-standard cardboard spools, or I will say you will experience it. I have issues with cardboard spools and they get stuck on the rollers from time to time. So I printed out some adapters to help with that issue that just clip on my cardboard spools. Also, clearing jams can be more involved due to the enclosed design, especially if filament breaks inside the AMS. If this happens, you have to take it apart and get that piece of filament out. I even did a video on how to do this, so if you want to see that process, I'll throw that video up here for you. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the AMS Lite, which is designed for the A1 and A1 Mini. The AMS Lite features an open design with 4 peg holders for the filaments to clip onto. It grips the spools by the center using spring-loaded pegs, and it accommodates various types of spools. The one thing to know is this system is limited to only 4 colors or materials of filament. It has no option to daisy chain or expand beyond this. Some of the big pros of the AMS Lite is spools do not get stuck because it actually is holding the filament in the center of the spool. You also have easier access for maintenance because it's an open design. Now talking about some of the cons for the AMS Lite, It kind of goes back to the you can only have 4 colors or materials because you can't daisy chain. Another thing is it requires additional accessories for mounting it on the top of your printer if you want to do that. The biggest con of the AMS Lite, if you ask me, is if you're in a super humid environment, the spools are exposed to just draw in moisture. Since there's no enclosure, the humidity can just get right in there, and so this is something that you should definitely keep in mind if you are in a humid area. But all in all, it's important to consider what the intended purpose is. If you only need 4 colors, then the A1 and A1 Mini is going to work great for you. But if you think that you want to print more than that in the future, then the P1S and X1 Carbon is probably going to be the way to go. So we've already touched on the material capabilities when we went over the basic specs, but I think it's worth circling back to this because looking at everything together this way, we can really see what each printer can handle and how they truly compare. I've made a chart so you can see all of the filament types. The categories are pretty straightforward. Ideal, the printer can handle it without any issues whatsoever. Not recommended, well, I think that one pretty much speaks for itself. Now, capable. Now, this is the one that made me stop and think. I'm like, what does capable even mean? It wasn't exactly clear on the website, it just said capable. And I even looked through the documentation, couldn't find anything. So I went ahead and I just reached out to Bambu Lab directly to get some clarification. And here is what they told me. The P1S is considered capable, but it's not ideal for certain tasks due to a couple of limitations. First, it doesn't have a chamber monitor to regulate internal temperatures. Second, its plastic panels don't retain heat as effectively as the steel panels on the X1 Carbon. That said, as long as you're aware of these differences and work within those limits, you can absolutely print these materials on the P1S. Now here's the kicker. Materials like carbon fiber and glass fiber, reinforced polymers, are listed as not recommended on their website. And that's true. Out of the box, it is absolutely not recommended to print these. And it's like, well, why? And the big difference is because the printer doesn't come with a hardened steel nozzle or extruder gear upgrade, and which are needed for those more abrasive materialed filaments. But if you upgrade the nozzle and gear to the hardened steel, the P1S becomes capable of printing everything the X1 Carbon can. That just shocked me. I was so surprised by that. With just a couple upgrades, you can unlock the full range of material capabilities. Of course, there are more things to consider, I will give you that, like the plastic panels on the P1S. They don't hold heat as well as the steel panels in the X1 Carbon, and I understand that. But I honestly think here's where we can get a little creative by adding some insulation around the printer. It could help maintain the temperature for those more tougher materials. So technically, with a few modifications, you could turn a P1S into something very close to an X1 Carbon, at least from a filament capability standpoint. That said, there are still features on the X1 Carbon that you cannot replicate on the P1S. For example, the LiDAR scanning and the fail detection system. If those are extra features that aren't really a priority for you, but printing specialty engineering grade filaments is, the P1S could be your printer with just a few upgrades. So moving to the next topic, let's talk about build volume. Because you probably noticed me saying technically when I'm talking about these printers. The X1 Carbon and P1S and A1 have the same build volume of 256 by 256 by 256 millimeters. And of course, the A1 Mini is smaller by 180 by 180 by 180 millimeters. But here's the catch. While the build volume is technically the same for the X1 Carbon, P1S, and A1, the A1 is the only one that can print its full build volume right out of the box. The X1 Carbon and P1S come with something called print volume limitations. This means they include safety margins that slightly reduce the usable area. These margins are in place to allow features like the Z-axis lifting, the filament cutting to work properly. Essentially, they're like protecting the nozzle against collisions and to make sure your printer is running smoothly. Now, you can override these limitations to unlock the full build volume, but it requires some tinkering. According to Bambu's documentation, this is only recommended if absolutely necessary, because it is disabling some of these safety features. You'd need to turn off the filament cutter and adjust software settings, which also means you'll need to keep your printer clean and follow specific steps to avoid these issues. But I will say, in the past year, on the X1 Carbon and P1S, I've only maybe run into 1 or 2 prints that didn't fit within the default build volume. And I could have tweaked these settings, but instead, I didn't feel like going through all of that, and I just printed it on another printer. And I realize not everybody has as many printers as I do, so I just want to let you know it is possible to do, and I will put that documentation of how to do that down below for you. And to give you a clearer idea, I printed cubes of their full volume to show you what the usable volume actually is. Now, like I said, these two print at their full build volume straight out of the box. But the P1S and X1 Carbon do have a smaller build volume out of the box, and if you decide to adjust those print modifications and a little bit of tinkering on your printer, you can absolutely get it to print at this dimension, at the full 256 cubed. Because it is just a slight bit smaller. Not a huge difference, but it is smaller. And you can see the size comparisons here. And even the A1, it fits directly in there. That's how small it is, because it's actually rubbing the sides when I take it off. So I just think it's important to be able to see what the full build size actually looks like, because the 256, it's quite big, but this on the X1 Carbon and P1S, it's still a sizable volume. Now, the other thing I was surprised by was how big this actually is on the A1 Mini. The dimensions are 180 cubed, and I tell you what, there are a lot of my prints that would fit in this build volume, because I'm never really using the full build volume of my printers. I would say half the time, most of the stuff I'm printing would easily fit on the A1 Mini. So these are just things to consider when you're looking at what printer you're needing and how big you actually need to print. But the one thing to know is the A1 does come with no restrictions. It offers a full build volume of the 256 by 256 by 256 right out of the box. So you're probably wondering, what is the actual build volume of the X1 Carbon and P1S? I am so glad you asked that, because I have it. I discovered that the real print volume is 220 by 243 by 250 millimeters. Now, the difference between the X1 Carbon and the P1S versus the A1 isn't a huge difference, but you can see the difference when they're side by side. So let's take a second and talk about the environment and workspace. When setting up your 3D printer, having a stable, level surface is more important than you might think. Think of it this way. Trying to print on a wobbly and uneven table is like trying to build a house on quicksand or during an earthquake. It's not going to end well. Vibrations during printing can lead to defects like misaligned layers and uneven surfaces. Make sure you're printing on a sturdy table or a workbench that can comfortably support its weight, and the surface should be flat. Any tilts can really mess with your calibration and impact your print quality. If your workspace has uneven floors, just adjust the feet with some shims to be able to level things out. When I started printing with my Bambu printer, I made the mistake of using a flimsy IKEA table. And I mean, at high speeds, the movement shook the table, and I thought the thing was about to collapse. I ended up moving my printer on the floor for more stability until I got a more heavy-duty bench for my workshop. And these benches that I have in my workshop are so solid, they could probably hold my car. And that's why I built them that way, because I did not want them to wobble, because I knew the importance of having a strong place to set your printers. So jumping into the space, let's talk about the space your printers will take up. The footprint, if you will. The P1S and X1 Carbon are pretty straightforward. What you see is what you get. They're self-contained, and if you're using an AMS, it can sit neatly on top, making their overall footprint surprisingly small. The A1 Mini, as the name suggests, has a smaller footprint. However, if you're using the AMS Lite, you're going to need additional space beside the printer for the filament unit and all of the Bowden tubes that have to go to the A1 or A1 Mini. So if you're printing single color, you're just going to need enough clearance on the front and back of the moving bed. This is my least favorite thing about the AMS Lite. It takes up a lot more room. You can 3D print mounts to place on top of your A1, but I don't recommend it, like honestly. With the 4 spools, when they're fully loaded, adding that much weight can add wobble to your printer when it's printing at high speeds. And I've even heard them breaking off and damaging printers. And for me personally, it's just not worth the risk. Now, wall mounting options do exist, but personally, I would rather not mount things to my wall and just be drilling into my walls. It's just something you have to keep in mind when planning your workspace, especially if you're going to be getting an AMS Lite. So now that we've covered the main features of each printer and their similarities and differences, I want to share my thoughts on which Bambu Lab printer might be best for you. If you stuck with me this long, I assume you're interested in my take. And if not, no hard feelings. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, hey, you stuck around. Thanks. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. The great thing about Bambu Lab printers is that you're getting a reliable, high-speed machine that is capable of producing excellent and high-quality prints. And that's no matter which machine you choose. You're stepping into a well-designed ecosystem. If you're new to 3D printing and don't know where to start, I always recommend the A1. First, it's at an affordable price point. The print quality is comparable to even the top-tier X1 Carbon. It's a straightforward, easy-to-use machine. While it is not as fast as the P1S and X1 Carbon, it produces high-quality prints, and that's what really matters, and the A1 delivers that. Plus, if you add the AMS Lite, you can enjoy multicolor printing without breaking the bank. So let's talk about the next type of person that might be looking to get a Bambu Lab printer. If you've already been dabbling in 3D printing and you're just looking to get a Bambu Lab printer, I always suggest to those types of people a P1S. It offers many of the same features as an X1 Carbon, and with a few upgrades like the hardened steel, nozzle, and extruder gear, you can print almost all of the same materials. While it doesn't include the LiDAR fail detection, the print speed and the quality matches the X1 Carbon. And if you're into multicolor prints, the P1S supports up to 16 colors when paired with 4 AMS units. It's truly a fantastic middle ground option for those wanting high performance without fully committing to the X1 Carbon's price tag. And that being said, let's just get into this last thing of, I can hear you guys already. Is the X1 Carbon even worth getting? Like, with all of those features, I'm like, is it even worth that price tag? Let me just answer with yes. The LiDAR camera has saved me countless times by catching failed prints early, which means less wasted filament and time. And if you value that kind of peace of mind, the X1 Carbon is absolutely worth considering. It's ideal for those people that just like to get the best of the best without worrying about upgrades or anything like that. Or if you're starting a business, this is a solid printer to get. This is where the additional capabilities really shine. And I personally love my X1 Carbon. I love those features because I'm always running to my P1S to see if the first layer looks good. And when I hit print on my X1 Carbon, if I don't get an alert on my phone saying failure detected, I don't even worry about it until I get my next alert saying print is complete. So that being said, if you're a person that, money's really not an issue when it comes to this printer, and you just want to get the best, then I get it. The X1 Carbon is an amazing printer. So my next question for you is, what do you think? Like, which Bambu Lab printer are you leaning towards? Let me know in the comments below, because I'm genuinely curious. So I hope this video has helped you make a more informed decision about your next 3D printer. I wish you a great day, and I'll go ahead and see you over here where we're going to be talking about the Bambu Slicer Bambu Studio.